beneath a 150-pound suit of armor that had mysteriously toppled off its pedestal just as he walked by. "Checkmate," a voice had whispered from the shadows just before the whole thing happened. It was the same voice that had called Reggie to the museum in the first place. It was a voice that Reggie knew for many years, which he trusted with his life. Now the mysterious figure turned and hurried away. There were still many moves to make before this particular chess game was over. "The killer has to be one of us," Tony said grimly as she moved her white knight to capture her opponent's black rook that Thursday afternoon. All the chess club members had spent much of the previous day being interviewed by the local police, but none of them had been able to provide any solid leads to who the killer might be. After that, several parents had forced their kids to quit the club until the killer was caught, and now its membership was down to a mere 6, including Tony herself. Although Tony knew her life was probably in danger, she didn't believe that simply quitting an after-school club was going to stop the murderer if he was truly intent on killing her. "Why do you think it's one of us?" Andy Rogers asked, moving his queen into a position that trapped Tony's knight. Andy was not only the quarterback for the school's football team, he was also one of the best players in the chess club. He had a particular talent for being able to think 3 or 4 moves ahead during a game. This made him an almost unbeatable opponent both on the football field and behind the chessboard. Like Tony, Andy believed that the club should continue to meet despite the recent deaths, or perhaps even because of them. As he put it, Russell, Patty, and Reggie would have wanted it this way. Now Tony carefully studied the board and considered her options, both in the games in front of her as well as the one being played out in real life. All 3 victims were members of this group, she explained. Each of them was killed in a place that they wouldn't normally go. This suggested they were lured there by someone they trusted. And who are we more likely to trust than one of our own? She now moved her bishop to counter the threat of Andy's queen. And he saw that he was vulnerable and immediately moved his queen back to a more defendable position. Plus, look closely at the pattern, Tony continued as she considered her next move. Brussels was killed outside a pawn shop. Patty was killed by crows, one type of which is called a rook. And Reggie was crushed by a suit of armor. Pawn, rook, and knight, Andy said, now realizing where his best friend was headed. All chess pieces. "The method is painfully obvious," Tony said as she moved a pawn forward on the board. It looked like a pointless move, but she was setting up a trap. She expected Andy to fall into 3 turns from now. "The question is, what's the motive? Why kill us off? If we can answer that one, then the chances are we have our murder suspect." Andy smiled and captured Tony's pawn with his bishop. Suddenly, Tony's king was trapped in absolutely no place to go. This meant that Tony had lost the game. "Checkmate," he said, smiling pleasantly. Tony had never seen it coming. "I think I knew who the killer is," Mark Mutter cried excitedly into the phone. "Who?" Tony asked, pacing around her bedroom with her cordless phone pressed to her ear. "Well, first off, it's not who you might think," Mark replied. "And second of all, I need to tell you in person. Can you meet me over at McQueen's Point in 15 minutes? Me think I have the proof we've been looking for." "All right," Tony agreed. 15 minutes. She stood in silence for a long moment, listened to the dial tone. Then she quickly dialed another number. Mark Minders was waiting for her by the safety railing when Tony arrived at McQueen's Point. Lookout a quarter of an hour later. Located at the top of a cliff with a 100-foot-high drop, McQueen's Point was a favorite spot for bird watchers and nature lovers. "Thanks for coming," Mark said anxiously. "Sorry to call you at such a out-of-the-place way, but the truth is, I think I'm being followed." "By whom? The killer?" Tony asked in surprise. Mark nodded and motioned her towards the bench. "I've spent the last few days digging around, trying to see if I could come up with a pattern to the deaths," he began. "I already know the pattern," Tony interrupted. "Pawn, rook, knight, They're all chess pieces. It's in ascending order of importance, from the weakest to the most powerful. What does that tell us? Mark asked, leading her on. That the killer is a chess player. Maybe even a very good one, Tony replied. It also tells me who the next victim will be. Who? Mark asked anciently. Me, Tony announced flatly. For a moment, Mark just sat there with his jaw hanging open in shock. Then he jumped to his feet and grabbed Tony by the hand. We've got to get Ooh out of here, he insisted. We can't let Andy get Ooh. Andy Rogers? Tony said in reply. You think Andy is the killer? Of course I do, Mark said, convinced. Whoever pulled off these murders had to be pretty strong. I mean, how many kids do you know of who can cut the cable on a pawnbroker's sign or push over a 150-pound suit of armor? Man, he's the biggest guy on the team. He's the only one who could ever done it. Maybe. But then, maybe not, Tony countered. Anyone with the right tools could have done those things. Plus, remember the chess pieces were in reverse order of importance. That means the next murder will involve a bishop. So how does that rule out Andy? Mark asked, confused. Look where we are, Tony said. McQueen's Point. This is where I'm supposed to be killed. But you just said you'd be killed with a bishop, Mark reminded her. No, not with a bishop, he explained. By a bishop. Isn't that right, Mr. Mitter? Tony, I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about, Mark said, eyeing her wearily. According to the dictionary, a witter is the pointed hat worn by Catholic clerks, like bishops, Tony explained. You're the killer, Mark. We all know how upset you were about being kicked out of the chess club. Although that wasn't our fault, you still hated the fact we managed to win the all-state championship without Ooh. Suddenly you felt Ooh was important, that you didn't count. Then your ego couldn't take that. You had to somehow prove that you were the cleverest and most powerful one of us all. Well done, Tony, Mark said coldly, gripping her wrist with his hand. But this game isn't over. I still have one move left. Far taller and stronger than Tony, Mark had no problem dragging her over to the guardrail and leaning her body over the principal below. It's a tragic story. Young teen, walking alone, slips and falls to her death over a cliff, he said with a chilling laugh. I'm sure the chess club will feel very sorry about losing you for about 5 minutes, just like they felt so sorry about losing me. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to heave Tony over the railing when he was suddenly caught in a blinding searchlight. Hold it right there, Mark, a voice ordered over the amplified blowhorn. Let the girl go. Step away and keep your hands in plain sight. I thought this might be a trap as soon as you mentioned McQueen's Point, Tony replied, gasping for breath as soon as Mark released her. At first I was confused by the fact that the bishop seemed to be missing from the murder pattern, but then I remembered the meaning of your name, and it all came together. That's when I called the police. You should know, Tony smiled. In order to win this game, we'll have to think at least 2 moves ahead. And that is CheckMate from Even More Scary Mysteries for Sleepovers. And we will make sure to post another one sometime very soon.